for me, sharing things openly with the world and on social media also, it's firstly practicing what we preach in terms of how we work with our clients and encouraging them to do more of that. But also it shows my team, I hope, that, you know, I'm willing to sit and be vulnerable and talk honestly about my struggles and my journey. And I want to cultivate an environment at work where they're also comfortable to do that and they can bring their whole selves. I know that's a little bit of a cliche, but they should be unafraid to come to work with their you know, their feelings laid bare if they want to. They shouldn't have to worry about putting a brave face on all the time and acting like everything's okay if it's not, because if they feel comfortable to share those things and they know that they're in a safe space and an environment where we seek to help each other and there's no judgment over those things, I think that's a really good place to be. And obviously by me leading by example in that way, I think that's the most effective way of cultivating an environment like that.
Hello and welcome to the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. This is the show where I speak with the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I am so excited to be joined by the marvellous Freddie Paxton. Now, Freddie is the CEO of the UK's #1 personal branding agency. It's called WOAW, spelled WOAW. Freddie began his career in journalism and he transitioned into marketing in his early 20s. By 26 years old, he'd already reached the C-suite level. And through the work that WOAW has done when it comes to looking after celebrities, looking after C-suite leaders, and a lot of the most successful founders and CEOs, Freddie has gained an unusual and interesting insight into the mind of a whole number of successful individuals and leaders, but he also has an interesting story to tell of his own. Welcome to the show, Freddie.
Thanks so much for having me. Pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to get cracking.
So, Freddie, before we dive deep into a conversation around personal branding, so I think that into itself is really interesting, how personal branding and what that means, that's evolved a lot over the years. But talk to me a little bit about how you came to be where you are today, because you're still very youthful and you've achieved a lot in a very short period of time.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey and definitely one that's not been straightforward or linear, so to speak. I mean, I went to university for 2 years, but I dropped out. So I guess that's I would say it's unconventional from a success standpoint, but actually you hear a lot of people that have been super successful that didn't stick out education. I just found that it wasn't for me, but there were certainly times in those earlier years when I was sort of 18, 19, 20, where I was wondering, okay, I'm going to drop out of uni, but what on earth am I going to do next? And so I just placed a real focus on being industrious and trying to gain as much practical experience as I could, which I felt I wasn't really getting in education. So that led me to sort of broaden my horizons from the sports. Well, started in sport, then broadened my horizons from that into wider marketing, was trying lots of different things, speaking to lots of different people, and ended up actually during the pandemic getting a job here at WOAW. I started as an account manager, but obviously being a small and growing company at the time, I had a real opportunity to kind of shape the way that we worked moving forward. And I was very lucky to work under somebody like Joe, who founded the company. And so I was able to develop a lot of skills that perhaps I wouldn't have if I was working at a bigger company where you are more limited in your progression. And that really led me to develop not only as a professional, but a person. And then that put me in good stead, or in a good place to take over from Joe when he decided that he wanted to take a step into doing something else. So yeah, certainly been given some good opportunities along the way by people like Joe, but I think it all boiled down to just me being industrious and learning to kind of back myself more and leverage the skills that I had, and being open to improve and learn new ones where possible.
Awesome. So an industrious dropout who then became a CEO of a top branding agency. I think that's something to be pretty proud of, Freddie. And honestly, we were talking about it before we started recording, but it's not always the easiest thing to be a CEO. And I think the CEO title itself these days has these grandiose connotations of sitting at the top of a tree and, you know, getting to enjoy a swanky lifestyle. Is it really like that, or is it something perhaps that's like a leading question, isn't it? Like, no, it is not. Talk us through some of the challenges because, like you, I went to university. I got a first class honours, but then could not, for the love of God, get a job in one of the corporate organisations, which I now rather serendipitously find myself advising. So, talk to me about that CEO role. Is it all that it's cracked up to be?
I think obviously it's easy to look from the outside and think, oh, when you're the CEO, you can take time off whenever you want, or there's no one telling you that you need to get this done by then. And there's not the kind of same pressure as having a direct line manager that might be constantly kind of watching over you, asking you to do things. Or you might look at a CEO that goes out to meet clients for lunch and think, oh, I wish that was my job going out for lunch. But actually, like, it's not all glitz and glamour at all. It's a complete pressure pot where you're in charge of not just the success of your own career and the company, but also the people that work at the company. You're responsible for people earning a salary and progressing in their own careers and paying their rent and putting food on the table. And if I don't do my job properly, there will be no company. And if there's no company, there's no jobs for these people. And so within that, there's lots of intrinsic pressure. There's lots of having to wear lots of different hats. I had a friend come into the office yesterday and shadow me because he wanted firstly to see what my day-to-day is like now. Being a close friend of mine, he was interested, but also he wanted to see more about what our world really involves in terms of our industry and our work. And something that he said to me is that you have to wear lots of different hats throughout the day. And he noticed that I'd go from speaking with a member of the team and having to obviously conduct that conversation in a certain way, to perhaps speaking to another member of the team, but having to conduct myself in a different manner because they're different personalities and people respond to different things. And then you speak to a client and you then become an authority and you're an expert and you're having to give advice to them in a certain way. And then you speak to a potential client and you're a salesman. So there's some insight there into how varied it can be. And obviously that's really enjoyable at the best of times, but at the worst of times, it's extremely draining. There's a lot of pressure and there is not enough hours in the day often to get all the things done that you want to. So you really have to be hard on yourself and hold yourself accountable and say, well, no one else is going to tell me that I need to get up now and do this and then do that. I've got to just make sure I do it myself. And that is a challenge and can be very draining. But it's not all woe is me, because obviously I do enjoy that challenge. And other people in this kind of position obviously are motivated by that challenge. But it's not as easy as some people might think.
That resonates such a lot with me personally, and I'm sure that will resonate with a lot of our audience as well. And this will make you laugh, but I have a little postcard here which says nothing will work unless you do.
Yeah.
And the wearing of the multiple hats and task switching can be, as you say, really emotionally draining, but also at the same time very rewarding. One of my favorite expressions is the harder you work, the luckier you get. And I guess I wonder whether that has been the case yourself, because obviously a lot of CEOs, you represent a lot of very well-known influencers and even celebrities as well. Is that the case, do you think? Because in the modern world of diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, and certainly social media, you sometimes think, hey, is everyone really working that hard? Have they just landed into these positions?
I think it's always been the case that for some people they can just kind of fall and land on their feet, and perhaps they might be given something, maybe a business to take over, or maybe given an opportunity that completely changes their lives. But I think on the whole, you've got to look at it in a way which is like, okay, well, if somebody is given a business by their dad, it's very easy to look at it and be like, oh, they've been given that. But ultimately, if they then do a good job of running it, that still makes them a good leader. So I think in a lot of cases, yeah, you do make your own luck. And I would often sometimes feel that sometimes, especially some peers and people my age, people sometimes are a little bit skeptical, like, oh, like, how have you got to C-suite level at our age? Like, there must be something to that. You must have got lucky somewhere along the way. And sometimes it's easy to fall into that trap of thinking and sort of believe that. But actually, No, I've been trying to be much more cognizant of the fact that I've got here through my own hard work by making difficult decisions and being unafraid to do so. And obviously, the more that you put yourself out there, the more conversations that you have, the more things that you say yes to that perhaps even when you've got a bit of trepidation about saying yes, the more likely that you are to then meet someone that might be able to introduce you to someone with a life-changing opportunity, or the more likely you are to put yourself in front of someone who's really impressed by the way that you communicate, and therefore then a conversation starts, and then you're onto something good. And so it's about putting yourself out there. And I think, yeah, it's a cliche about creating your own luck, but it's a cliche for a reason. I do think that it's true. And you're one thing's for sure is that you're never going to get lucky if you just sit around and don't put yourself out there. It's very unlikely that anything good's going to come of that. So I think that for me, yeah, resonates for sure.
Talk to us about personal branding. This is why I was so excited about doing this podcast, because you obviously spend a huge amount of your time looking after others' profiles and looking after their personal brand. And, you know, I've seen over the last decade that the connotations around personal branding have now really become very positive. Perhaps wasn't the case maybe a decade ago. People were saying, personal branding, why would we do that? What is personal branding? I know it sounds a rather simplistic question, but it would be great to understand why personal branding is really important to what you do, and how you've seen that trend start to shift with a lot of your clients, entrepreneurs, CEOs, celebrities alike.
Yeah, I think as it's a kind of newer arm of marketing, in the same sense that social media in the grand scheme of things is also still relatively new, and it's evolving. And within that, so is personal branding. So naturally, you face some skepticism from people who perhaps think that it's just for egotists, or they don't really care about social media. So why would I want to put myself out there? But the reality is that everybody has a personal brand. Everybody has a personal brand, whether they like it or not. We're all known for something. You might be known as the funny guy around the office. You might be known as the approachable one who's always ready to give advice. You might be known as an absolute expert in your field. That in itself is having a personal brand. Some people, though, are choosing now, and more people are choosing now, to control that narrative and to put messaging out there with intention, and to really figure out exactly what they want to be known as and to be seen as, and how that can benefit them. Whereas others are kind of just letting that narrative play out as it plays out without intention. And I think, to use an analogy that I always use when I speak to our clients or potential clients, if you think about, you go to an industry event, and I'm sure you'd be familiar with this, Layla, you've gone to lots of events, do lots of networking. Often when you walk into a room, especially if you're earlier stage in your career or you've just started your business, you walk into one of these industry events and there's that necessity to go and introduce yourself to people and say, hi, my name is X and my business is called Y and we do this. And that conversation then starts to get going, and then you might be able to make a nice connection. But if you think about somebody with a strong personal brand who is known as a thought leader in a certain space because they've been putting consistent messaging out there and really working on that narrative and putting the right messages out there and telling a story in the right way, they walk into that event, people already know who they are, they know their name, they know what their business does, they know what the values of that business might be, they know what the biggest achievements have been, in the business's recent history, because they've seen that content. And those conversations that you have are therefore then already facilitated, and those potential clients and those people that can really benefit you in the business gravitate towards you. And that is, I think, the most powerful example of what a good personal brand can do. And obviously social media being what it is, you're able to reach lots of people very quickly. And therefore that's why it's such a powerful tool. So no, it's not just for egotists. It's not just for people that like talking me. It's not about posting pictures of your kids or talking about all your vulnerabilities online. That can be part of it, sure. But it's about a thoughtfully curated set of messages that you want to put out to the world to achieve very particular goals. And I think that's what we do very well at WOAW.
I love how you articulate that, because we all do have a personal brand. It's how much we choose to share and how vulnerable we may or may not want to be. As you say, when you walk into an exhibition or a conference or a room, how much do you share about yourself? Hey, my name's Layla. I have mental health issues, for example.
Mm.
How would you introduce yourself when you walk into a room? And if I may be so personal, I'd love to know more about Freddie's personal brand, because I've noticed that you put some really quite sensitive, beautiful posts up there, and actually you don't always get to know about the person from what you see on the surface, which kind of loops back to the beginning of this conversation,
Mm.
where there's a need to feel and be a certain way. Actually, this wasn't gifted on a plate. Actually,
Mm.
you have your own vulnerabilities and things that you wouldn't know unless you asked the question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking that. And I think um how would I introduce myself at an event? Well, I would like to think that some people would come up to me and say, "Oh, you're that guy who is running that company now. I saw that you've taken over from Joe," and I'd be like, "Yeah." And then that's a good example of how that conversation is facilitated. But how would I introduce myself if they didn't already know me? I think I would. I would often go into those conversations actually leading with my age and be like, "Oh, I'm a 26 now 27-year-old CEO." But actually, I realized that I was using that kind of as a limiting factor, and that could come across. I was given some really good advice by somebody who was like, I understand why you might start a conversation like that, but actually it makes me feel like maybe you're insecure and you're downplaying yourself straight away. Like you're not a 26-year-old CEO or 27-year-old CEO. You're just a CEO. So I would just introduce myself by, talking about what we do and the power of it, and soft and using it as an opportunity to soft sell, I guess, and talk about how we can provide solutions to problems that lots of people face in terms of how to articulate their story and their message. But with regard to my own story, yeah, I'm always happy to share vulnerabilities and talk about things that I've struggled with throughout my adult life. When we talk about mental health, for example, I think that's something that lots of people are able to relate to. And if you're going to build a community and look to kind of build trust with people and show that you're not just some guy writing a load of posts about how great your business is, but actually like here's the highs, here's the lows. Here's some encouragement for people who may want to kind of get to this position. And like I said, it's not linear. So yeah, I've had my own struggles with mental health. I went through a couple of periods of depression. I used to struggle really badly with anxiety, and sometimes obviously those things can still creep up on you. But I've been fortunate enough to have found coping mechanisms, and had a real openness to try therapy and different types of therapy, which I think is unfortunately it's kind of a necessity for us all. I think everybody should go through some sort of therapy, because I think it's really important for the expansion of the way that you think. Yeah, and of course, you know family life as well. I'm so lucky to have such an incredible family. My mum is my best friend, and and someone that I learn an incredible amount from, and her work ethic. But I think I learned the value of hard work and things like that from her, because she was a single mother. My dad died when I was really young, and so I watched her struggling at times to make ends meet. We never went without, and for me to act like I grew up in extreme poverty, as many people do, that would be unfair. But we struggled at times, and money was tight, and I watched her work so hard to make sure that myself and my brother were really well provided for, and that I think has rubbed off on me and given me the sort of work ethic that I would like to think I have now. And so yeah, when I look at the whole journey combined, there's certain, it might be easy for people to think, oh, you're in a good position in business, and you're a white guy. You've got sort of that privilege, and therefore you probably grew up in a privileged environment, and I guess compared to some people in many ways I did, but at the same time I certainly wasn't born into money or success, and I never had anything handed to me. All I had handed to me was a great role model in my mum, and people around me that loved me, and that's enabled me to then see the value of hard work, know what it's like to have strong priorities and a good work ethic. And I think that's been the key driving force behind what's enabled me to maybe accelerate my career and get to where I've got to so far, because I've had that sort of influence. So yeah, and those are the sorts of things that I think are really powerful to share through content if people are comfortable too. And obviously my audience have found that relevant, because for them it answers a question like, so yeah, you're in a good position, but how did you actually get there? What does that look like? And so that's the value for me in sharing those things.
Freddie, thank you so much for sharing that.
Hey,
Honestly, it's so great to hear you talk about the journey, and not just the personal journey, but obviously the successes that you've had. I too have had a lot of struggles with mental health, and like you, I think seeking therapy is not something ever to be ashamed of. Actually, it's something that, to your point, it makes you think very, very differently, and it gives you that headspace that we all need in a world where there's, eye watches, phones pinging everywhere, social media and the likes. But taking those moments just to have a pause, and in particular, you mentioned white males and privilege there, which I'm so glad that you did, because it's easy for us to judge books by their cover. And it frustrates me a lot at times, because if we don't ask the questions of how people are, but how they really are, and what it is that makes them driven and how they came to be where they are today, then we would never know some of these things.
Mm.
I worked for the Samaritans for about 3 years when I was younger, when I was at university doing various different jobs. And one of the, well, there was a whole number of people that would call up about lots of different things. Obviously can't disclose, but suicide was hugely common, and the statistics at that time, and still is often the case, is predominantly with guys, and younger guys as well, because this previous idea of what a man or a manly man would be is that whole big boys don't cry kind of thing. And I sometimes tease my husband because I say that's what he's like, up in Idaho, it's all about big boys don't cry. Actually, why shouldn't we be talking about this? Because without sharing some of the vulnerabilities, then we don't create the safe space that ultimately, in your case, obviously engages with the audience, but actually it really helps others understand that it is okay to then seek therapy, that it's okay to be going through mental health struggles, anxiety, depression, and all those different kind of things. In particular, when you get to that place of being a CEO, whatever your age, it's so important to be not only a good role model, but a really great real model, which is what I think you really are, Freddie. And I can tell, correct me if I'm wrong, that your mum being a really brilliant real model to you as you were growing up has been a key driving factor
Yeah.
in your tenacity to get to that place of success.
Yeah, 100%. I appreciate you saying that, and you're right in saying that about, being a driving force for me. And I think, on that sort of leading by example piece, I think for me, sharing things openly with the world and on social media also, it's firstly practicing what we preach in terms of how we work with our clients and encouraging them to do more of that. But also it shows my team, I hope, that, I'm willing to sit and be vulnerable and talk honestly about my struggles and my journey. And I want to cultivate an environment at work where they're also comfortable to do that, and they can bring their whole selves. I know that's a little bit of a cliche, but they should be unafraid to come to work with their feelings laid bare if they want to. They shouldn't have to worry about putting a brave face on all the time and acting like everything's okay if it's not, because if they feel comfortable to share those things and they know that they're in a safe space and an environment where we seek to help each other and there's no judgment over those things, I think that's a really good place to be. And obviously by me leading by example in that way, I think that's the most effective way of cultivating an environment like that. So that's largely the intention behind it, and I think that's something that we're really good at. I'm probably biased, but I think my team are excellent at that. There's no judgment here. There's no sort of horrible bitchy culture. There's no nastiness. Everybody's here to kind of support each other, and if someone's going through something difficult, they know they can rely on one another. And I don't like that whole thing, we're a family here at this company. No, we're not. We're colleagues, we're professionals, and we're here to do good work, but we're also here to look after each other while we do it, and to have a nice time while we do it, and show each other respect and love, and allow each other to bring our whole selves to work. And I think that's really important.
Respect, love, and trust, absolutely key things when it comes to being, I think, a great CEO, but then also being a great colleague, leader, brother, sister, son, all of those various different things. And I think, how you've articulated that is, it's very much how we think at Dial, actually. It's about how diversity means different things to different people. And whilst we may say we're a family in the sense that we spend more time with our colleagues than we do with our loved ones and our actual family, we need to have that glue that binds us together, to help us ultimately
Mm,
do great business and help people do well by doing good.
absolutely.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to ask you a couple of little lightning round questions. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to answer each. I'm starting with the hardest one first. What would you define success as, or what does success mean to you?
Success to me means feeling contentment and feeling happy in what you're doing every day. If you feel motivated by getting up in the morning, or you go home in the evening and you feel excited about what the next day brings, and you're excited by what you might be able to achieve, that's success. It should never be measured by money, or things like that. Those are all contextual things. It's about happiness.
What does diversity and inclusion mean to you?
I think the first things that come to mind when you think about diversity, it's easy to think of race straight away, but that's not necessarily it. I think for me, it's about welcoming different perspectives, different ways of thinking, embracing the fact that you actually are never going to fully understand or be able to relate to everybody with their own quirks, their differences, their backgrounds, etc. But actually embracing that there are just different people that you don't need to fully understand, but if can accept and try to understand where possible, I think the world would be a better place. So that's what diversity is for me. It's all about those differences and the multitude of those differences.
Absolutely. And that equals great innovation and success. Cheeky question here. Who's your favorite client? And tell us about some of the people you represent.
Do you know what? Like, obviously, we're under NDA with a lot of them, so they don't want everyone to know that we're doing what we do for them, and that speaks for the authenticity as well, because a lot of people don't know that we're doing this for certain people. But obviously, we do have permission to speak about some of them, and I think we worked with a number of the dragons from Dragon's Den, for example. Tage is one of our clients. He's given us public testimonials, so I know that we can say that, and he. Yeah, he's a fantastic guy. Always has so much wisdom to share. He has a lot of interesting insights from his time working in TV, but also running, one of the UK's and the world's most successful companies in Vitobiotics. So just being around people like that and just picking up little bits of wisdom from the things that they say, incredible.
I have to say, I am a big Tej fan,
Mm.
a very big Tej fan, and Dragons fan as well. So Tej is maybe the favourite. Well, anyone else that you particularly loved working with? And then finally, I guess before we wrap up, have you any favourite books or podcasts other than this one, obviously, that you're listening to?
Yeah. I think other people that I like to work with, like the campaigns that we run that I really enjoy are ones that have a strong mission-led angle. So we've had people whose businesses seek to reduce the geographical birth lottery and give access to people anywhere in the world the same access to jobs, essentially. And that sort of thing I really feel inspired by working on, because we're actively helping them achieve that mission. And if they're able to achieve that mission, then you're genuinely making the world a better place. So there's tons of examples of clients that we work with that have really strong social missions that we really buy into, and we're quite selective as well about who we work with. For that reason, we really want people that we can have a genuinely good impact on the world through. So yeah, that would be the answer to that. And then books wise, it's a difficult one. What am I reading at the moment? I think I always go back to kind of classics like Shoe Dog, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, things that can kind of open your thinking, those perspectives. They're absolute classics, but I enjoy books like that. I also there's the Mark Manson book as well, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I enjoyed that just because it's quite funny and it challenges certain norms. This whole idea of looking in the mirror every morning and telling yourself that you are beautiful and you love yourself. And his thinking towards that is like, well, if you're doing that, it already shows that you kind of think that you're not. So like snap out of all of that rubbish. And I kind of sometimes like those things that you read and then it kind of gives you a smack across the face and you're like, oh yeah, no, I should stop thinking like that. Like it's just let's just take it back to basics and not overcomplicate things. So I enjoy things like that. I also like autobiographies a lot as well. So obviously I come from a sports background, so any sports autobiographies that can kind of give you an insight into the way that super successful people think and like create high performance environments, the likes of Pep Guardiola. There's been books written about him which aren't autobiographical, but also like Arsene Wenger, the former Arsenal manager, and just some insights into the way people think and create those environments. I find stuff like that really interesting.
Super answers. I love Richard Kawasaki. I'm not
Mm.
sure whether that's how you pronounce it or whether that's the motorcycle.
Yeah,
However, he is fantastic. Rich Dad Poor Dad is such a brilliant book. One of my
yeah,
favorite authors at the moment is a guy called Ryan Holiday,
yeah.
and he does a lot around stoicism.
Mm.
So he wrote a book called Ego is the Enemy, which I adore, and there's another one called The Obstacle is the Way.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's kind of really, giving you this smack around the face and giving yourself a kick and going, right, you know what, actually, I might have gone through hard times, but actually, you live once and let's make the most of that. So,
Yeah, yeah. I was reading some stuff on Stoicism recently as well. It's really interesting. There was a story about there's a philosopher who was in Auschwitz, and he speaks about his concentration camp experiences, and then also in the second half of the book about how that relates to like a Stoic mindset and attitude, and it's called Man's Search for Meaning. If anyone listening to this is interesting, it's amazing.
oh my God, sorry. That is the book that I know it sounds weird, but that is the book that really helped me through grieving my father.
Right.
I've read it about 3 times. I've got it on Audible. Victor E. Frankl,
It's Frank.
absolutely incredible. And it does sound horribly depressing, but his theories around logotherapy,
Yeah.
just fascinating and insightful. And I'm already thinking, right, Freddie, we need to do a podcast now on the day stoic. This is
Yeah, no,
great.
it's
This
incredible.
is great.
It does sound depressing, but when you realize how people can find joy and excitement in the most menial things during the most stressful, difficult, awful time of their life, it really puts things into perspective. Okay, if you switch your mindset a little bit to look for joy in things, you can be much happier. It's really powerful.
It is so powerful, so powerful. I read that, and then I read a number of Ryan Holiday's books, and then I bought a coin. Um, it says Memento Mori on it, which is
Mm.
all about, the fact that you could die tomorrow. So what you're going to do about right now. It sounds very profound, and it is very profound. But I ordered my coin off Amazon and was like, so I carry it around with.
A nice little reminder. There's nothing wrong with that.
Excellent. So, Freddie, I said the podcast was going to be 20 minutes, and obviously you spilled over because you are an absolute brilliant, brilliant guest. I'm going to do my best to summarize. I don't know if I'm going to do a very good job, but you have already taught me a huge amount just being in this podcast with you. You've taught me the power of vulnerability, the power of the personal brand. So incredibly important given the fact that the society that we live in today and being a CEO, being a founder, it can be a very, very, very lonely place. And it's really easy for people to take to social media and be keyboard warriors and say this and that and the other. Actually, the importance of controlling who you are, the brand that you represent, whilst also doing it in a meaningful and a thoughtful way that has true passion behind it. And I think how you've articulated yourself, your vulnerability so kindly, and the work that you do with WOAW, I think is really exceptional. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. You asked some really great questions. I really enjoyed chatting through all that stuff. It's nice to have the space to be open and honest about things. So thanks for making me feel comfortable and for being a great host.
Thanks, Freddie. My name is Lane Mackenzie Dallison, the founder and CEO of Dial Global. We've been joined today by the marvelous Freddie Paxton of WOAW. Make sure that you check him out. You can visit us on any of your favorite podcast channels, Apple, Spotify, or directly on the website. Please do hit subscribe and leave us a review, www.dialglobal.org/podcast. See you again very soon.